The Vidians chortled with derision when they first saw the battered 5-kilometer derelict adrift in the neutral zone. But their laughter died in their throats when they detected the radiation signature of ancient human fusion drives. Captain Lawrence Burns strode into the dimly lit bar on Zanzibar 1, his 6'2" frame cutting an imposing figure. The 45-year-old Terran Space Navy veteran sported short graying hair and a scar across his left cheek, badges of honor from countless battles. Burns was here to negotiate with Xanth, a high-ranking Vidian official, over the fate of the newly discovered ghost ship. Both the Terrans and the Vidians coveted the massive vessel and its unidentifiable weapons, knowing that whoever controlled this ancient technology would gain a decisive advantage in the Cold War that had kept the two species locked in a tense stalemate for decades. If the talks failed, it could well mean the end of the fragile peace and mutually assured destruction for both civilizations. Burns spotted Xanth across the room, the 7-foot reptilian alien flanked by 2 armed guards. He approached the table and sat down, meeting Xanth's piercing yellow gaze without flinching. The Vidian wasted no time in getting to the point. "Your species' primitive technology is no match for ours," Xanth said, his voice dripping with condescension. "The Vidian Empire claims this derelict by right of superior capability. Your presence is not required." Burns leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Funny you should mention that," he replied, his tone sharp as a blade, "because we've already sent a team to secure the ghost ship. Any attempt to take it by force will be considered an act of war. So let's drop the posturing and get down to business, shall we?" The Terran captain stared unflinchingly at his Vidian counterpart, a silent challenge hanging in the air between them. The fate of both their species hung in the balance, and Burns would be damned if he let the arrogant reptiles gain the upper hand. The negotiations had barely begun, but the battle lines had already been drawn. As Burns and Xanth argued over the ghost ship's fate, Lieutenant Commander Maria Alvarez led her team of 12 battle-hardened Terran Space Marines through the derelict's dark, winding corridors. The only light came from the flashlights mounted on their assault rifles, casting eerie shadows on the metal walls. Alvarez, a 35-year-old veteran with short black hair and piercing green eyes, kept her weapon at the ready, her senses heightened for any sign of danger. The Marines entered a massive central chamber, and their jaws dropped at the sight before them. The room was filled with advanced technology beyond anything they had ever encountered, with pulsing energy conduits, holographic displays, and sleek, alien machinery. Alvarez's eyes widened as she took in the incredible sight, her mind racing with the possibilities this discovery could hold for humanity. "Set up a perimeter and start analyzing this tech," Alvarez ordered, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "I want to know what we're dealing with here." But before the Marines could carry out her commands, a hail of plasma bolts suddenly rained down on their position. Alvarez dove for cover behind a large console as 20 heavily armed Vidian commandos, led by the ruthless Commander Zorgax, stormed into the chamber. "Surrender the ship immediately, humans," Zorgax bellowed, his reptilian features twisted into a snarl. "You are outnumbered and outmatched." Alvarez peeked out from behind her cover, her grip tightening on her plasma rifle. "Like hell we will," she growled. "Marines, open fire!" The chamber erupted into a fierce firefight, with plasma bolts and kinetic rounds crisscrossing the space. The Marines, despite being outnumbered, held their ground thanks to their superior tactics and advanced weaponry. Alvarez personally took down several Vidian soldiers, her plasma rifle leaving smoking holes in their armor. Just as the tide seemed to be turning in the Marines' favor, a deafening alarm began to blare throughout the ship. The central chamber started to glow with an eerie red light, and the ancient technology hummed with increasing intensity. Back on Zanzibar 1, Burns and Xanth received urgent reports of the confrontation on the ghost ship. They rushed to their respective command centers, their faces grim as they realized the true stakes of the situation. The fate of both their species now hung in the balance, and the outcome of this battle could determine the course of the galaxy for generations to come. Alvarez's heart pounded as she barked orders to her team. "Gomez, Sanchez, set those charges on the far wall. Michaels Parker lay down suppressing fire. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as the Marines took cover behind the alien machinery. Gomez and Sanchez sprinted across the chamber, ducking and weaving as they planted explosive charges. "Charges set," Gomez yelled. "Fire in the hole," Alvarez shouted. The Marines hunkered down as the charges detonated with a deafening boom, blasting a hole in the wall. Smoke and debris filled the air. "Move, move, move!" Alvarez ordered. The team rushed through the opening, plasma fire nipping at their heels. They raced down the corridors, splitting up at intersections to confuse their pursuers. Alvarez and 5 others burst into the hangar bay and skidded to a halt, staring in awe at the sleek fighter craft arrayed before them. The ships thrummed with energy, their alien alloy hulls gleaming under the lights. "Get in those fighters!" Alvarez commanded, sprinting towards the nearest one. The Marines scrambled into the cockpits, their hands flying over the strange controls as they tried to power up the engines. Just then, Zorgax and a dozen Vidian soldiers stormed into the hangar, plasma rifles blazing. Alvarez swore and slammed her fist on the console. The fighter roared to life and lifted off, its anti-gravity drive sending ripples through the air. The other Marines followed suit, and soon the hangar was filled with the scream of engines and the sizzle of plasma fire. The Terran fighters danced and spun, their advanced maneuverability allowing them to evade the Vidians' fire with ease. Alvarez gritted her teeth as she pulled her fighter into a tight loop, coming up behind 2 Vidian craft. She squeezed the trigger, and a barrage of high-energy plasma rained down on the enemy ships, shredding their hulls. The Vidians spiraled out of control and crashed into the hangar floor in a ball of flames. On the bridge, Xylok's eyes gleamed with triumph as he hacked into the Prometheus's mainframe, streams of data flashing across his screen. "Yes," he hissed, his fingers flying over the keys. "The secrets of this ship will soon be ours." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the bridge. Xylok's eyes widened in horror as he realized what he had done. "No, no, no!" he screamed, frantically trying to undo his mistake. But it was too late. In the hangar, Alvarez's comm crackled to life. "Alvarez," Burns's voice was tense with urgency. "The ship's self-destruct sequence has been activated. You have to get out of there now." Alvarez swore again, her mind racing. She keyed her comm. "All units abort mission, get to the rendezvous point ASAP." The Terran fighters blasted out of the hangar, engines screaming as they tore through the void. Behind them, the Prometheus shuddered and convulsed, explosions ripping through its hull. Zorgax roared in fury as he realized what was happening. He turned to flee, but it was too late. The Prometheus exploded in a blinding flash of light, the shockwaves slamming into the Terran fighters and sending them tumbling end over end. Burns stood before the Terran High Council, his jaw clenched as he faced the holographic projections of the stern-faced admirals. The council chamber was awash in the blue glow of the holograms, the only sound the soft hum of the projectors. "Captain Burns," Admiral John began, her voice sharp, "the Vidians are demanding answers. They claim you deliberately destroyed the ghost ship to provoke a war. What do you have to say for yourself?" Burns met her gaze unflinchingly. "With all due respect, Admiral, the Vidians are lying. They ambushed my team on the Prometheus and tried to steal the ship's technology for themselves. We had no choice but to activate the self-destruct." Admiral Novak leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "And what of this ancient alien threat you claim to have uncovered? The Chintal? We've found no evidence to support your claims." Burns' fist tightened at his side. "That's because the Chintal have been covering their tracks for centuries. They've infiltrated both our governments, manipulating us from the shadows. The data we recovered from the Prometheus proves it." The admirals exchanged skeptical glances. "And where is this data now?" Admiral Jean asked. "I've entrusted it to Dr. Nakamura and his team. They're working to decrypt it as we speak." Admiral Novak shook his head. "You're treading on thin ice, Captain. The Vidians are calling for your head, and frankly I'm inclined to give it to them." Burns stepped forward, his eyes blazing. "You can't let them win, Admiral. If the Chintal are allowed to continue their plans, it could mean the end of both our civilizations." The admirals fell silent, considering his words. Finally, Admiral Jean spoke. "You have 1 week, Captain. 1 week to bring us concrete proof of this Chintal threat. If you fail, you'll be facing a court-martial." Burns nodded curtly. "Understood, Admiral." As the holograms flickered out, Burns turned to leave the chamber, his mind racing. He had to find a way to expose the Chintal before it was too late. Dr. Isaac Nakamura hunched over his workstation, his eyes bleary from staring at the lines of alien code scrolling across his screen. The Prometheus data was unlike anything he'd ever seen, a complex web of encryption and failsafes that seemed designed to keep its secrets hidden at all costs. "Any progress?" Burns asked, striding into the lab. Nakamura looked up, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Some, but it's slow going. This encryption is like nothing I've ever encountered." Burns leaned over the workstation, scanning the code. "Keep at it, Doctor. We don't have much time." Suddenly, an alarm blared through the lab. Burns and Nakamura spun around to see a figure clad in black body armor burst through the door, a plasma rifle in hand. Burns drew his sidearm, firing off a shot that ricocheted off the assassin's kinetic barriers. The assassin returned fire, forcing Burns and Nakamura to dive for cover behind the workstations. "Chintal," Burns growled, popping up to fire another shot. "They must have followed me here." The assassin advanced, his rifle spitting deadly bolts of energy. Burns and Nakamura scrambled from cover to cover, desperately trying to stay 1 step ahead of the assassin's fire. Burns' comm crackled to life. "Captain, this is Alvarez. We've got a situation down in the hangar bay. Multiple hostiles, heavily armed. They're trying to steal the Prometheus fighters." Burns swore under his breath. The Chintal were making their move. "Hold them off, Alvarez. I'm on my way." He turned to Nakamura. "Get that data decrypted, Doctor. I'll buy you as much time as I can." With that, Burns charged forward, firing his sidearm as he closed the distance to the assassin. The two clashed in a brutal hand-to-hand fight, trading blows and grappling for control of the plasma rifle. Burns managed to land a solid punch to the assassin's jaw, sending him stumbling back. He followed up with a kick to the chest, knocking the assassin to the ground. Burns snatched up the fallen plasma rifle and fired a single shot, piercing the assassin's helmet and ending the threat. Burns turned back to Nakamura, his chest heaving. "Keep working, Doctor. I've got to get to the hangar bay." As he sprinted from the lab, Burns could only hope that he wasn't too late. The fate of both the Terrans and the Vidians hung in the balance, and time was running out. Burns raced through the winding corridors of the secret Terran research facility, his boots pounding on the metal grates. The asteroid field outside the viewport shimmered with 1,000 points of light as his team followed close behind. Admiral Elena Ivanova greeted them in the hangar bay, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. She clasped Burns's hand firmly, her blue eyes sharp and calculating. "Captain Burns," she said, "it's been too long." Ivanova led them past rows of captured fighters from the Prometheus, their sleek hulls gleaming under the bright lights. Engineers and scientists swarmed over them, taking readings and scribbling notes on data pads. "We've been studying these craft day and night," Ivanova explained as they walked. "The technology is unlike anything we've seen. It could give us a real edge against the Chintal." She stopped in front of a massive warship, its hull a patchwork of alien alloys and Terran steel. "This is the TSS Athena, our latest prototype." Burns ran his hand along the ship's flank, feeling the thrum of power beneath his fingers. "Impressive." "She's outfitted with the same advanced systems as the Prometheus," Ivanova said. "Plasma cannons, graviton torpedoes, phase-shifting cloaking device, and an AI that puts our best strategic minds to shame." A holographic figure flickered to life beside them, a faceless humanoid form wreathed in glowing blue light. "Greetings, Captain Burns," it said in a smooth, androgynous voice. "I am Ares, the Autonomous Response and Engagement System." Ivanova put a hand on Burns' shoulder. "We're going to give you and your team a crash course in operating the Athena. If the Chintal are coming, we need to be ready." As they trained on the Athena's systems over the next few hours, Ivanova shared her own experiences with the Chintal. "I fought them once," she said, her eyes distant. "Early in my career. A secret mission that went sideways." She shook her head. "We barely escaped with our lives. The Chintal, they're not like any enemy we've faced. Single-minded, relentless. They'll stop at nothing to wipe us out." Burns clenched his fists. The more he learned about the Chintal, the more he realized just how high the stakes were. As they prepared to embark on their mission to expose the conspiracy, an urgent distress call came in from Alvarez. Her Marines had been escorting a refugee convoy when they were attacked by a heavily armed Vidian force. He turned to his team, his jaw tight. "Change of plans," he said. "We're going in. Alvarez needs our help." They boarded the Athena, the ship humming to life around them. Burns strapped into the command chair, his heart pounding. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them head-on, for his fellow soldiers, for the innocent lives at stake, for the future of humanity itself. Burns clenched his jaw, his mind racing as he weighed his options. Every instinct screamed at him to rush to Alvarez's aid, to save the refugees and the captured Terran officials from the Vidians' clutches. But he knew that exposing the Chintal conspiracy was the only way to prevent an all-out war that could cost countless lives. With a heavy heart, Burns made his decision. He turned to his team, his voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside him. "Alvarez, you and your team will have to hold out a little longer. We can't abandon our mission now, not when we're so close to the truth." He met Dr. Nakamura's gaze, the scientist's face etched with grim determination. "Doctor, you're with me. We're going to infiltrate that research station and find the evidence we need to blow this conspiracy wide open." Burns selected a small group of his most skilled operatives to accompany them, leaving the rest to provide support and extraction. As they boarded the TSS Athena, Burns felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins, mingled with a deep sense of foreboding. The Athena slipped through space like a silent predator, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it invisible to the Vidian patrols. As they approached the heavily guarded research station, Burns and his team made their final preparations for the infiltration. "Harkis, initiate phase shift on my mark," Burns commanded, his fingers flying over the ship's controls. The AI's smooth voice responded, "Phase shift ready, Captain, awaiting your command." Burns took a deep breath, his eyes locked on the looming station. Mark. The Athena shimmered and vanished, passing through the station's thick outer hull like a ghost. Moments later, they materialized inside a dimly lit corridor, the air heavy with the stench of alien chemicals. Burns and Nakamura exchanged a quick nod before splitting off from the rest of the team, moving swiftly towards the station's main data center. The other operatives fanned out, planting explosives at key structural points and engaging the Vidian security forces in brief, brutal skirmishes. As they neared the data center, Burns and Nakamura encountered a group of heavily armed Vidian guards. Plasma bolts filled the air as the two sides traded fire, the corridor lighting up with the deadly exchange. Burns ducked behind a support column, his plasma rifle humming with power. He leaned out and squeezed the trigger, the weapon bucking in his hands as it spat out a barrage of searing energy. 2 Vidians went down, their armor smoking from the impact. Nakamura, armed with a compact plasma pistol and a hacking toolkit, darted from cover to cover, his movements quick and precise. He managed to flank the remaining guards, dropping them with well-placed shots to their unprotected heads. With the way clear, Burns and Nakamura burst into the data center, a cavernous room filled with rows of humming servers and pulsing data streams. They quickly located the main terminal and set to work, Nakamura's fingers flying over the keys as he hacked through the station's firewalls. Just as the download began, a cold voice cut through the air. "I must admit I'm impressed, Captain Burns. You and your team have proven to be quite the thorn in our side." Burns spun around, his rifle raised to find Xanth emerging from the shadows, a wicked-looking energy blade in his hand. The Vidian's eyes glinted with malice as he stalked forward, his movements fluid and predatory. The Vidian chuckled, the sound harsh and grating. "You humans are so predictable, always rushing headlong into danger, never stopping to consider the consequences." With a snarl, Xanth lunged forward, his blade slashing through the air. Burns parried the blow with his rifle, the two weapons clashing in a shower of sparks. They traded blows back and forth, each seeking an opening, their movements a deadly dance of skill and strength. Nakamura, his attention focused on the data transfer, glanced up to see Burns locked in combat with the Xanth. The download was nearly complete, but the Vidian was pressing his advantage, forcing Burns back with a flurry of vicious strikes. Just as Xanth raised his blade for a killing blow, Nakamura finished the download and yanked a plasma grenade from his belt. He primed the explosive and hurled it towards the Vidian, shouting a warning to Burns. Burns dove to the side as the grenade detonated, the blast wave throwing Xanth off his feet and buying them precious seconds. "Time to go, Captain!" Nakamura yelled, already sprinting for the exit. Burns scrambled to his feet and followed, plasma bolts sizzling past his head as Xanth opened fire from behind. They raced through the corridors, linking up with the other operatives as they went, the station shuddering around them as the planted explosives began to detonate. They burst into the hangar where the Athena was docked, the ship's ramp already lowering to receive them. Burns and his team piled inside, sealing the hatch behind them as the Athena's engines roared to life. But before they could make their escape, Alvarez's panicked voice crackled over the comm. "Captain, the Vidians have captured Admiral Ivanova and the other Terran officials. They're threatening to execute them unless you surrender yourself and the Athena." Burns felt his blood run cold, his grip tightening on the ship's controls. The Athena hovered in the hangar, poised to flee, as Burns faced an impossible choice: complete the mission and expose the Chintal conspiracy, saving countless lives in the long run? Or sacrifice everything to rescue his mentor and the other hostages from the Vidian's clutches? Burns's mind raced as he formulated a plan, the weight of his decision hanging heavy on his shoulders. He turned to his team, his voice steady and resolute. "Nakamura, Alvarez, you're with me. The rest of you, take the data and get the hell out of here on one of the station's shuttles. We'll handle the rescue up." Nakamura and Alvarez nodded, their faces set with determination as they prepared their gear. The others hesitated for a moment, torn between their duty to the mission and their loyalty to their captain. But Burns fixed them with a steely gaze, brooking no argument. "That's an order. Now move." As the majority of the team reluctantly departed, Burns, Nakamura and Alvarez boarded the Athena. The sleek ship hummed to life around them, its cloaking device engaging with a soft whir. Burns took the controls, his hands flying over the console as he plotted their course. The Athena slipped away from the station like a ghost, its presence masked by the advanced technology. They raced through the void, the coordinates from Alvarez guiding their path. As they approached their destination, the scanners lit up, revealing the imposing form of the VSS Imperator, surrounded by its escort fleet. Burns leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied the readouts. "There," he said, pointing to a heavily shielded section near the battleship's core. "That's where they're holding the hostages." Alvarez's fingers danced across her console, inputting commands with lightning speed. "I'm detecting a lot of activity from my Marines," she reported. "Looks like they've managed to sabotage the Vidian's comms and sensors. We should have a window to infiltrate." Burns nodded, a grim smile tugging at his lips. "Then let's not waste it. Ares, initiate phase shift on my mark." The AI's smooth voice filled the cockpit. "Phase shift ready, Captain. Awaiting your command." Burns took a deep breath, his grip tightening on the controls. "Mark!" The Athena shimmered and vanished, passing through the Imperator's shields as though they weren't even there. Moments later, they materialized in a dimly lit corridor, the air heavy with the stench of ozone and scorched metal. Burns and his team moved swiftly, their weapons at the ready as they navigated the labyrinthine passages of the Vidian ship. They encountered resistance almost immediately, the corridors erupting with the sizzle of plasma fire and the harsh bark of kinetic rounds. Burns ducked behind a bulkhead, his rifle spitting deadly bolts of energy at the Vidayan guards. Beside him, Nakamura lobbed a plasma grenade, the explosion tearing through the enemy ranks in a blaze of searing light. They fought their way deeper into the ship, the close-quarters combat devolving into a brutal melee of flashing blades and bone-crunching strikes. Burns led the charge, his rifle blazing as he cut a path through the Vidian defenders. At last, they reached the detention block where the hostages were being held. Burns blasted the door controls with a well-placed shot, the heavy portal sliding open with a hiss of hydraulics. Inside, Admiral Ivanova and the other Terran officials lay bound and beaten, their faces etched with pain and exhaustion. Burns rushed to Ivanova's side, cutting her restraints with a flick of his combat knife. Burns helped her to her feet, pressing a captured Vidian rifle into her hands. He turned to the other hostages, quickly freeing them and distributing weapons and armor from the fallen guards. "Stay close and keep your heads down," Burns ordered, his voice ringing with authority. "We're not out of this yet." They fought their way back through the ship, the hostages proving their mettle as they joined the fray. Outside, the muffled booms of explosions and the shrill whine of alarms told of Alvarez's Marines wreaking havoc among the Vidian fleet. As they neared the Athena, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows, flanked by a cadre of elite warriors. Xanth's eyes blazed with hatred as he leveled his weapon at Burns, his voice dripping with venom. "You've interfered with our plans for the last time, human," he snarled. "Now you die." Burns stepped forward, his rifle held loosely at his side. "It's over, Xanth. Surrender now and face justice for your crimes." The Vidian leader laughed, the sound harsh and grating. "Justice? There is no justice for your kind, only death." He lunged forward, his blade flashing in the dim light. Burns met him head-on, their weapons clashing in a shower of sparks. They traded blows back and forth, each seeking an opening, their movements a deadly dance of skill and strength. Around them, the hostages and Alvarez's team engaged the Vidian elites, the corridor filling with the chaos of close-quarters combat. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, mingling with the clang of metal on metal and the cries of the wounded and dying. Burns pressed his advantage, driving Xanth back with a flurry of strikes. The Vidian leader's defenses began to crumble, his movements growing sluggish and desperate. With a final devastating blow, Burns knocked the blade from Xanth's hand, sending him staggering to his knees. Burns leveled his rifle at Xanth's head, his finger tightening on the trigger. But something stayed his hand, a flicker of mercy in the face of his enemy's defeat. "Surrender, Xanth," Burns said, his voice steady. "It's over." The Vidian's eyes flashed with rage, his face contorting into a snarl. "Never!" He lunged forward, a hidden blade slipping from his sleeve. But Burns was ready, anticipating the treacherous move. He sidestepped the blow and brought the butt of his rifle down on Xanth's skull, the impact echoing through the corridor with a sickening crack. Xanth crumpled to the ground, his body twitching before falling still. Burns stood over him, his chest heaving with exertion, a mix of triumph and exhaustion etched on his face. "Captain," Alvarez's voice cut through the din of battle. "We need to go now." Burns nodded, turning to the hostages and his team. "Everyone on the Athena, move." They piled into the ship, sealing the hatch behind them as the engines roared to life. Burns took the controls, his hands flying over the console as he initiated the phase shift. The Athena shimmered and vanished, slipping away from the Imperator like a ghost. As they rejoined the Terran fleet, the distant rumble of explosions marked the destruction of the Vidayan research station, the flames of its demise a beacon of hope against the darkness of space. Burns leaned back in his chair, a weary smile tugging at his lips. They had struck a blow against the Chintal conspiracy, but he knew the fight was far from over. The secrets of the Prometheus still held the key to unraveling the ancient enemy's plans, and he would stop at nothing to see that truth brought to light. Burns stood on the bridge of the TSS Athena, his gaze fixed on the swirling starscape outside the viewport. The weight of his new rank, Commodore, hung heavy on his shoulders, a constant reminder of the responsibilities he now bore. Admiral Ivanova had placed her trust in him, and he would not let her down. The doors hissed open behind him, and Alvarez strode onto the bridge, her face etched with determination. "Commodore," she said, snapping a crisp salute, "the task force is assembled and ready for your orders." Burns nodded, turning to face his second-in-command. "Good. We have a lot of work ahead of us." He brought up a holographic display of the data they'd recovered from the Vidian research station, the glowing lines of code casting an eerie blue light across the bridge. "Dr. Nakamura and his team have been analyzing this information around the clock," he said, his voice grim. "And what they've found is disturbing, to say the least." Alvarez leaned in, her eyes scanning the data. "The Chintal have infiltrated both the Terran and Vidian governments." "At the highest levels," Burns confirmed. "And that's not all. They're preparing to launch a full-scale invasion using a fleet of advanced warships hidden somewhere in the quadrant." He zoomed in on a particular section of the data, highlighting a series of coordinates. "Our only chance is to find and destroy that fleet before they can strike, and we don't have much time." Alvarez straightened, her jaw set with resolve. "What's our first move, sir?" Burns brought up a star map, a web of glowing points and lines. "We start by tracking down the Chintal's hidden outposts and staging areas. We'll hit them hard and fast, gather any intel we can, and keep moving. The Athena's advanced sensors and phase-shifting technology should give us an edge." He turned to face his crew, his voice ringing with authority. "Make no mistake, people. This is the fight of our lives. The Chintal are unlike any enemy we've ever faced, and they won't go down easily. But I know that each and every one of you will give everything you have to protect our people and our way of life." The bridge erupted into a chorus of "Yes, sir!" "And I, Commodore," the crew's determination and loyalty palpable in the air. As the task force set out into the void, Burns felt a sense of purpose settle over him. They would hunt down the Chintal no matter where they hid, and they would stop them. There was no other option. Days turned into weeks as the task force waged a relentless campaign against the Chintal, striking at outpost after outpost, staging area after staging area. The battles were fierce and bloody, the enemy's advanced technology and fanatical determination pushing the Terrans to their limits. But with each victory, each scrap of intel gathered, Burns and his crew grew more determined, more focused. They adapted their tactics, honed their skills, and pressed forward, driven by the knowledge that the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. It was during one of these engagements, a vicious firefight aboard a crippled Chintal battleship, that Burns found himself face to face with the enemy's true face. A towering figure in black armor, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly malevolence, stepped out of the shadows, a twisted smile on his lips. "Commodore Burns," he said, his voice a rasping hiss, "I've been looking forward to this moment." Burns raised his plasma rifle, his finger hovering over the trigger. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice steady. The figure chuckled, a sound like bones scraping together. "I am the Overseer," he said, spreading his arms wide. "The guiding hand behind the Chintal's glorious purpose." He began to circle Burns, his movements fluid and predatory. "For centuries we have watched your kind, studying you, manipulating you, shaping the course of your history to suit our needs." Burns tracked the Overseer's movements, his rifle never wavering. "And what is your glorious purpose?" he asked, his tone laced with contempt. The Overseer's smile widened, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. "To bring unity to the galaxy," he said, his voice rising with fervor. "To absorb all sentient life into a single, perfect collective. A hive mind, freed from the chains of individuality and conflict." Burns felt a chill run down his spine at the Overseer's words. "You're insane," he said, his finger tightening on the trigger. "We'll never submit to your twisted vision." The Overseer laughed, a sound that echoed through the ruined ship. "You have no choice," he said, his hand drifting to the hilt of a strange crystalline blade at his side. "The process has already begun. Soon your people will be one with us, and your pitiful resistance will be nothing more than a memory." With a snarl, the overseer lunged forward, his blade flashing in the dim light. Burns met the charge head-on, plasma fire and blade clashing in a storm of sparks and burning plasma. They danced back and forth across the deck, trading blows with blinding speed. The overseer was fast, his movements almost too quick to follow. Burns soon found himself pushed back, his suit's shield straining under the onslaught. But the Commodore refused to give in. He drew upon every ounce of his skill and training, every hard-won lesson from a lifetime of combat. He ducked and wove, parried and struck, slowly turning the tide of the battle. In a final, desperate move, Burns managed to knock the overseer's blade from his hand, sending the alien creature staggering back. He leveled his rifle, prepared to end the threat once and for all. But the overseer, his face twisted into a snarl of hatred, reached for a device on his belt. "If I cannot have this galaxy," he hissed, his thumb hovering over a glowing red button, "then no one will." He turned and ran, his heart pounding in his chest as the ship shuddered and groaned around him. He could hear the overseer's laughter echoing behind him, a sound of madness and despair. Seconds later, he burst into the hangar bay, his team already piling into their waiting shuttle. He threw himself through the open hatch, screaming for the pilot to take off. The shuttle rocketed away from the doomed ship, the shockwave from the exploding vessel buffeting them as they tore through the void. Burns watched through the viewport as the Chintal battleship disintegrated into a ball of roiling plasma, the overseer's final spiteful act consuming him in a storm of fire. As the task force regrouped, licking their wounds and preparing for the final push against the Chintal fleet, a priority message came through on Burns' personal channel. His blood ran cold as he read the words scrolling across the screen. Xanth had escaped custody and was now leading a rogue Vidian faction in an all-out assault on the Terran colony of New Horizon. The message was a desperate plea for help, a last-ditch call for the task force to abandon its mission and come to the colony's aid. Burns slumped back in his chair, his mind reeling. The Chintal had to be stopped, that much was certain. But could he really turn his back on his own people, leave them to face Xanth's wrath alone? He closed his eyes, the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. The fate of the galaxy, of every man, woman and child, both Terran and Vidian, rested in his hands. And he would have to make that choice one way or the other. The consequences would be his to bear, for good or for ill. The future, the lives of billions, depended on him getting it right. Burns gritted his teeth, his gut twisting as he surveyed the tactical display. The Chintal's hidden base loomed before them, a malevolent presence pulsing with eldritch energy. He turned to Alvarez, his eyes hard. "Take the Ares and half the fleet. Get to New Horizon. Hold the line. Don't let Xanth have an inch." Alvarez nodded, her jaw set. "We'll give 'em hell, sir." As the Ares and its escort peeled away, Burns turned to the Athena's crew. "This is it. We find the heart of this thing and we rip it out." The Athena plunged into the fray, plasma lances and graviton torpedoes ripping through the Chintal's defenses. Swarms of enemy fighters and drones enveloped them, the void lighting up with the fire of 1,000 suns. Burns gripped the arms of his command chair, knuckles white as the Athena shuddered under the onslaught. "Ares, status!" "Shields at 40%. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12, the AI reported, its voice eerily calm amid the chaos. Wave after wave of Chintal ships threw themselves at the Terran fleet, their hulls twisting and pulsing with unnatural life. The Athena danced and spun, its phase-shifting hull flickering in and out of reality as it wove through the maelstrom. And then, suddenly, they were through. The heart of the Chintal base loomed before them, a grotesque, pulsating mass of flesh and metal. Burns felt his gorge rise at the sight, a primal revulsion that went beyond mere disgust. "Scan it," he ordered, his voice hoarse. The readings came back, and the truth of the Chintal was laid bare. A race of parasites, their minds linked in a vast, malevolent hive. For millennia they had lurked in the shadows, assimilating, subverting, corrupting. Burns knew what had to be done. The Athena had to be sacrificed, driven into the heart of the hive mind. It was the only way. He turned to his crew, his eyes blazing with resolve. "Evacuate, get to the shuttles, I'll finish this." They hesitated, loyalty warring with the knowledge of what had to be done, but in the end they obeyed. One by one they filed out, until only Burns and Ares remained. Burns's hands flew over the controls, plotting the Athena's final course. The hive mind loomed before him, a cancerous blight upon the stars. Ares, divert all power to phase shift and weapons. The Athena surged forward, reality twisting and warping around it as it plunged into the heart of the Chintal. Eldritch energies crackled and flared, the ship's hull groaning under the strain. Burns gritted his teeth, pouring every ounce of his will into the Athena's systems. Deeper and deeper they dove, the hive mind's defenses tearing at them like frenzied predators. And then, with a final desperate push, they were through. The core of the hive mind lay before them, a pulsating mass of horror and madness. Burns' finger stabbed down on the trigger, and the Athena's weapons unleashed hell. Graviton torpedoes and phase-shifted plasma tore into the heart of the Chintal, ripping and shredding and burning. The hive mind convulsed, a psychic scream of agony tearing through Burns's mind. He roared in defiance, pouring every ounce of his hatred and determination into the assault. And then, with a final cataclysmic blast, it was over. The hive mind shattered, the Chintal's base exploding in a nova of searing light. The shockwaves slammed into the Athena, hurling it end over end through the void. Burns clung to the command chair, his vision tunneling as the G-forces tore at him. Warning alarms shrieked, the ship shuddering and bucking like a wounded beast. And then silence. Burns floated in the wreckage of the Athena, his body broken and bleeding. Darkness crept in at the edges of his vision, and he knew his time was short. But even as the void claimed him, he saw a flicker of light. A Terran shuttle, battered but unbroken, cutting through the debris field. The hatch slid open, and armored figures poured out, jets of flame from their suits propelling them through the vacuum. They found Burns amid the wreckage, his body shattered but his spirit unbroken. As they carried him back to the shuttle, he looked out one last time at the shattered remnants of the Chintal base. They had won, but at what cost? You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.